2024 has been an interesting year. I managed to find a little extra time at the workbench and complete, on average, about 2 model kits per month. These projects varied from tiny 144th scale kits all the way up to one of my biggest models so far. So with all these builds under the belt, it's time to look back on the worst 5 model kits I built this year. Hello everyone, I'm Matt and this is Model Minutes. Join me today as I explore the worst 5 model kits that I experienced this year. As someone who makes reviews about model kits, I have compiled this list keeping in mind some of the following criteria. So first up, what is the quality of the product like? Is this a high quality moulding or does it suffer from lots of flash and other imperfections? How old is the tooling of the kit? Some companies do like to hide old toolings in new boxes, and this will be taken into consideration with the models treated appropriately. How well designed is the model, and do the parts fit together well, or does the model need a lot of work to make it look acceptable? Finally, how many marking schemes does the model come with, and are any included decals printed to a high quality? Of course, I can't just base my opinions on something without having also built it, so I will also be considering my own experiences of the kit. How well did I manage to build it? Did I encounter any problems with the model, or did I make mistakes myself that could have affected the final outcome? Finally, and I think most importantly, did I have fun and enjoy building the model? After all, what is the point in a hobby if you don't enjoy it? All of these things have helped inform my experiences and choices over the last 12 months, and keeping these things in mind, have curated this following list. Anyways, with that all mentioned, let's get straight into number 5. The 5th position of the worst kits I built this year is the Airfix Fiat G50 in 1/72nd scale. I don't think it would be any surprise that old toolings will make an appearance in this list. As you could expect for a 1967 vintage tooling, it's not a particularly great model. The version I built here was actually a re-release from 2021, which Airfix brought back as part of their Vintage Classics range, and I had always fancied building one, and this year I got my chance. Well, there isn't a great deal to say about this model kit. It has a very simple design, suffers from flash and mould seams on various parts, and I had to do a little work trimming these parts to get them to fit. I did use this kit as a practice model for my airbrushing skills, which I used on that mottling for the camouflage paint scheme. So whilst not a great model kit, it was manageable and definitely not the worst that will be seen in this video. Moving on to position number 4. This slot is taken by the Dora Wings Curtiss-Wright 89 Jeep in 1/48 scale. So this is a 2021 tooling and release, and you would think that it would be a pretty good model seeing as it's only a couple years old at this point. Well, the mould quality is pretty good and the decals were lovely. But sadly, I found the build of the model to be pretty horrible. It suffers from a lack of locating pins and marks, so joining parts together relies on a best guess, coupled with the fact that most joints are just flat surfaces, mating to another flat surface. I found this kit suffered with gaps in lots of places, which needed to be filled and sanded. The design is questionable as well, with the landing gear being designed in a way that when the weight of the model rests on it, it could break them free rather than make it stronger, as you would expect. There are also weird joints of parts along the flat surfaces of components rather than on the edges, which again leaves seams and gaps that shouldn't be there. I thought this would be a fun build, but by the end I really disliked it. As my first experience of building a Dora Wings model kit, I really hope the rest of the range are not like this, and this is just a bit of an anomaly. This brings us nicely on to position number 3, and in 3rd place is the Airfix Fairy Rotodyne in 1/72nd scale. I was excited to build this one when it came back into the Airfix range for 2023, being a rather unique and interesting subject. Sadly, despite being a 2023 release, it is part of the Vintage Classics range and is a re-release of the 1959 tooling. As you would expect from a model of that age, the mouldings suffer from flash, mould seams, ejector pin marks, and on my example, one of the propeller blades had come broken in the box. The build of this kit highlighted a number of gaps that needed filling, questionable fit of some of the parts, and a lack of detail. Although the decals are modern and printed by Cartograph, I found that they didn't align correctly with the windows on the side of the fuselage, and I had to cut and overlay them to fit. All in, this was a clunky kit that, although I was initially excited to build, by the end I was somewhat disappointed in it. No doubt a more talented modeller than myself could work wonders with a vintage tooling like this, but that doesn't spark joy for me, and I would much rather build a model that isn't tempting me to put it in the bin. Before I get to the worst two models that I built this year, I would like to take a moment for some honourable mentions. These are kits that have either suffered from some kind of problem in their design, or perhaps in my skill in completing the build. So the first honourable mention is the Mr.Craft XFY1 Pogo in 1/72nd scale. Whilst the tooling is much more recent in comparison to the Fiat G50 or Rotodyne that we saw earlier, it's still not up to modern standards. Dating from 1993, the mouldings suffer from a little flash in places, but the real problem stems from the fact that this is a Mr.Craft re-release from 2022. Mr.Craft is known for reboxing other brands, and this is no exception. And in typical fashion, the plastic used is not up to the highest quality, being somewhat soft and a little chalky, which is a strange quality to have. The instructions are not great, and actually feature the history for a MiG-29, so they clearly didn't proofread these before they were released. The main problem I had with this kit was the disintegration of one of the decals. I have experienced Mr.Craft decals falling apart in the past, and despite applying microscale liquid decal film to protect them, I still experienced it on this kit as well. I managed to hide this problem by installing it as part of a diorama, where it is on display as a gate guardian or at a museum of some kind, but on the whole, I would be much happier if Mr.Craft models came with better decals. Another honourable mention are both the Airfix Fokker DR1 and Bristol F2B World War I fighter planes, which came as part of a vintage classic set released in 2023. As they are vintage kits though, with the original tooling dating from 1957, again ejector pin marks, mould seams, and gaps that need filling, along with other improvements that had to be made to get these two models looking presentable. I particularly like that the clear display stands made a reappearance in this set, but that isn't really enough to save these models from being mentioned here. The final honourable mention I would like to make is another Mr.Craft model kit, this time the F86 Sabre in 1/72nd scale, a 2018 release, but I bought it this year. I picked this up as I was told by a viewer that it was the worst model kit they had ever built, and I wanted to see how bad it truly was. Well, it's certainly not the worst kit I have built, but Mr.Craft can't take much credit for the good features of this model. The tooling is actually a Heller kit from 1979 and is fairly good. Flash was minimal and the fit of the parts was actually pretty decent. It still suffered from that weird chalky and cheap plastic that Mr.Craft uses, but on the whole, the assembly of the parts was quite fun. As with the Pogo I mentioned earlier though, the decals are a bit of a letdown in this kit. It comes with a whopping 11 paint schemes, but I don't really think that holds much value if the decals are prone to falling apart. I found the transfers on the blue sheets to be a bit thick, a little flaky, and less likely to conform to the plastic details, whilst the ones on the white sheets were thinner, but more likely to rip and break. Again, I used some microscale liquid decal film, but despite my best effort, still encountered silvering with the decals and their reluctance to conform to the details on the plastic. If there is one improvement I would like to see from Mr.Craft, it would be their decal quality, especially if their kits are retailing around the same price range as competing companies. I think that will do for the honourable mentions though. There were so many kits that I built this year that we would be here for ages if I listed them all, so feel free to take a look back at my video uploads to see some more of them. So, moving on to position number 2, and the kit that takes second place is the Airfix Tiger 1 in 1/76 scale. This is a 2019 release, which has fortunately been replaced by a new tooling since 2020. The particular Tiger one I built here, whilst a 2019 release, is actually part, or was part, of the Vintage Classics range and was originally tooled in 1964. The kit suffers from many inaccuracies, not only in the scaling of parts and the finesse of the mouldings, but to missing components such as the rear exhaust covers and a storage bin on the turret that were present on the original machines. Whilst it is possible to build the model kit to a basic standard, I didn't really see the point in addressing these design errors, and instead opted to embrace the fact that they were missing, perhaps being taken for scrap from a damaged vehicle which had been abandoned in the desert. I built a little diorama for this kit, adding some 3D printed figures and other elements to represent an abandoned tank in the desert which was being visited by some sightseers. Whilst I didn't think that much of the kit, and it's probably a good thing it's been replaced by a new tooling, I am quite happy with my finished mini diorama displaying a rusted and unkept vehicle, which perhaps is a bit of a metaphor for the kit itself. And finally, this brings us to the number 1 slot in my worst builds of 2024, and this goes to the Revell P51D Mustang in 1/72 scale. I built this kit as a revisitation to one that I did when I first started my channel in 2016. Back in 2016 I built the Revell Mustang and thought it was pretty good. How wrong I was. Having learnt quite a bit over my modelling journey, I now realise that this kit, which has been around in its current format since around 2010, is anything but good. This is one of those times where a company hides an old tooling in a more recent style boxing. You could find toolings from the last 10 or 20 years in boxes like this, so when you buy this one and get it home, it might be disappointing to see that inside is actually a 1963 tooling, and a rather crude one at that. Featuring flash, sink marks, ejector pin marks, and mould seams, this kit presents a few challenges to make it look presentable. I found myself fighting poor fit and alignment of parts, a few gaps in places, and some very clunky details, or a simple lack thereof, with this model. Not to mention that the dimensions of the model, when it's completed, are just a bit, well, off. It looks like a Mustang, but that's about it. It feels as though someone designed this kit based on a description and not scale drawings or measurements. On the plus side, if you did get this kit, the decals are pretty good, so you could probably save them for something else. I think I built this model to a better quality than the first time in 2016, but I'm not sure how much time I would be willing to invest to further improve a kit like this. Especially when other companies are selling more recent toolings for similar prices, and without the lack of clarity regarding tooling ages of their products on the boxes. Something I think most model companies could do better in the future is be more transparent with the age of the toolings of their kits, so that we, their audience and customers, can make more informed purchasing decisions. Hopefully a positive change we will see in the coming years. And with that, I think it's time to conclude this list here. 2024 has been quite a busy year for me, not just at the workbench, but also in other areas of my life as well. I'd like to thank everyone who has supported the channel this year, from my Model Club members here on YouTube and Patreon, to those who have supported the channel in other ways, and everyone who has watched, commented, liked and shared. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome my latest members to the Model Club. They are James Lofthouse, Callum's Modelling Centre, Sandwich, Von Miller, Martin Reitberg, Aviate History, Darren Hall, Steve, Ms. Modeler, Adrian Hook, Benji Millard, Chris Evans, Greg Webb, Philip Pascoe, Bernie Hagyard, Morton Bay Modelling, Asgeir Fjellstad, Kleber SF, Ian Ellison, Stephen Haynes Models, Rob Johnson, Andrew Rose, and John J. If you'd like to come on this modelling journey with me and join our growing community, make sure you subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a modelling video. Finally though, a massive thank you to you for watching this one. Let me know in the comments what your modelling plans are for 2025, and I will see you on the workbench again soon.